Welcome to the UN Global Compact Academy. I'm Cynthia Muffuh, Head of Human Rights and Gender at the UN Global Compact, and I'm so excited to welcome you to this Changemaker session. Through this series, you can learn directly from some of the most innovative and influential people around the world. In today's session, we are joined by Lucita Jasmin, a trailblazer in the field of business and human rights. Lucita is the Director of Sustainability and External Affairs at the April Group, which is a leading manufacturer in the paper and pulp industry based in Indonesia. With a wealth of experience and a passion for promoting human rights around the world, Lucita Jasmin is a driving force in shaping a brighter and more socially responsible future for both her organization and the wider community. Over the next 20 minutes, we will learn about the vital role that the private sector plays in advancing human rights around the world, the action that she has taken towards April Group's efforts to identify, address, track, and account for human rights impacts of their operations and business relationships, and Lucita's take on what future-proof and equitable leadership looks like. So let's get started. Lucita, welcome. Let's start by getting to know a little bit about you. I want to begin by asking you what came before this. What are some of the experiences you've had as a leader that really revealed to you the importance of human rights in business? Because we don't come to this just directly.
No.
What brought you here?
It's a whole evolution.
Yes.
Also, even on a personal basis, yes. So I come from the Philippines, but in 2002, I left for my first overseas job, which is basically really in April.
Yeah.
But I was based in Riau, where the operations are, and I spent 5 years there. And what that did is it grounded me in terms of the operational realities. And the company was still in its development phase at that time, so many of the issues were still about operational concerns and also environmental impact. So sustainability was still rather nascent. It was still beginning. And then, of course, there was this incredible opportunity that came my way, which is to be able to work, served in the UN. And that was with the UN Environment Program in Nairobi, Kenya. Yes. And I spent 7 years there learning about intergovernmental processes, global policy making, multilateral negotiations. But at the same time, of course, it was a very rich, diverse, multicultural environment. Right? And then came the opportunity to return to April and return to Asia, coming with that perspective now of having learned how global processes work and then blending it, of course, with having to operate on the ground or deliver on the ground, right? And that was an interesting time because it was when the company has just adopted its sustainable forest management policy. So the transformation was already beginning. And then 5 years hence, we announced our 2030 sustainability agenda and broadening our ambitions to cover climate, nature, people, and sustainable business growth. Now, on the aspects of human rights, having lived and worked in 3 developing economies, of course, they've all amplified for me the importance of advancing, respecting human rights. You'd see, even in the UN setting, where people have been born to, I guess, to diplomatic lives and speaking 3 or 4 languages from birth, right? And then you come from a developing economy where access to education is a privilege, not a right, not an entitlement. And that already brings the issue of human rights very close to home. Close to home, exactly. And of course, there are many other examples about living and working in a developing economy that really highlight for us the importance of advancing this agenda of human rights.
Yeah. So let's talk about the role of the private sector, because, I mean, that's why we're here, really, in this work we do. What is the role, in your opinion, that the private sector has in advancing human rights, and how does this translate to action? I mean, you spoke very much about sort of your personal sort of experience and what brought you here. But of course, we're trying to, get the private sector engaged. And how do you think that they should be doing this?
So I just realized that actually 3.3 billion people are employed in the private sector. So that's about 40% of the global population. And just given that number, you can already see how much of an impact private sector can make and actually has on people's lives and on human rights. So I do not just see it as a role, I really see it as an imperative. I think I've said already also on the panel that I see it more as a moral responsibility in businesses to actually advance and respect human rights. And then the way we do this is, of course, that is where the Global Compact and the local networks come in, because you provide us with the guidance and the methodologies, the frameworks to make this happen. We need to have policies, systems, frameworks, processes in place to ensure that we're able to mitigate any risks of potential adverse impact on human rights, and not just and beyond that, of course, it's really about respecting and advancing human rights and integrating it in the way we operate on a day-to-day basis. So this should be seen as part of the overall business transformation as well, as we are looking to address our climate impacts, our impacts on nature. It's not just about really empowerment in terms of livelihood development and all this capability building with the local communities and the people within the organization. It's really about having a human rights lens to how we deal and engage with them on a day-to-day basis.
Now, you and I are both very clear about this moral imperative, this moral obligation, and when we talk about business and human rights. When we speak to private sector, how does respecting human rights create value for them? Because it's always the bottom line. We're always in our work, always working on the business case for these areas. So can you share how you made that business case internally at the April Group? Because when we talk about the passion of it and the absolute necessity, but business looks at the numbers. So how were you able to convince them and translate that into business, really?
Sure. So there is a study conducted by the Harvard Business School, that there are 4 drivers of organizational performance. You have economy, industry, people, and leadership. People accounts for 33% of the drivers of what delivers organizational performance. And at the same time, if you want to move the business performance from just effective to best in class, 70% of what you need is actually going to be driven by your people. So that puts people at the core of what you need to really drive business productivity, performance, strategy, and transformation. So that in itself, and if you don't treat your people right, no matter what you do with your talent retention or recruitment or development, the basic imperative or requirement to respect the rights of the people would always matter. So in terms of your employee value proposition, human rights records counts.
Yes.
So that's one. In companies like us, especially us operating in a developing economy, there is this matter of the social license to operate, which is as important as the legal license, the financial, or any other licenses that we need to have as a business, right? And if we do not advance human rights, or if we are not seen as companies respecting human rights, we are at risk of losing our social license. So those, I think, are sufficient justification for us to actually present a business case on why we should have human rights integrated in our operations. But at the same time, having said that, as I've mentioned, I do not think that human rights should have to make a
business case, absolutely.
to justify its importance, right? It's just fundamentally really what businesses need to do. Now, having said that, it's also important to understand that this is an evolution. We're all learning about this. And as we learn and as we build our capabilities to understand the implications and to know how to really engage on the issue, I think we need to understand that it's not about shaming, it's not about blaming, it's really just about investing in the right systems and capabilities so that we can all build organizational capability to address this.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Your company operates in an industry that connects closely with environmental issues. You've spoken about that. And so how do you harmonize your company's environmental sustainability actions with your commitment to human rights, sort of ensuring that both are addressed comprehensively in your sustainability initiatives?
So, Cynthia, in our company, we've always said that environmental and social are 2 sides of the same coin. So we've always seen them in integration. And it's also because when you're operating in a developing economy, we've always realized that many of the environmental challenges that we face are actually rooted in socioeconomic drivers.
Yes.
So unless you address the socioeconomic drivers, then I don't think we would be very effective in resolving some of our environmental issues. So I think that's something that's a fundamental realization that we've always had. And the way we do this, for example, is that many of our initiatives, like when we're engaging with the communities to encourage them or to discourage them from using fire to clear land, we need to understand what's driving that, right? And basically, really, that's just driven by the need to clear land for agricultural purposes. So it's not just about telling them not to do something, but it's also about providing them the alternative to do so, or the capability to do so, and providing them incentives so that you can encourage and get them engaged in the discussion until the behavior has actually changed. We've adopted the same integrated approach with our April 2030 agenda. So we've looked at our sustainability ambition across the pillars of climate, nature, people, yes, and also sustainable business growth. So under the social pillar, we recognize that as we operate in a rural part of Indonesia, there's still extreme poverty within the community. So one of our targets, for example, is eradicating extreme poverty up to 50 kilometers from our operational boundaries. It's quite ambitious. We're still figuring out the kinds of partnerships with government and other stakeholders to make that happen. But it is an ambition that we set for ourselves. Stunting is a major concern in Indonesia as well. So that's something that we would like to help address by reducing the incidence of stunting also in the areas where we operate. And finally, of course, the role of women. So we've set targets for increasing the number of women in management roles, positions within the organization, and also just in terms of the ratio of women in employment. This is forestry. So this is traditionally a male-dominated industry, but we're trying to change that paradigm and see where we can actually incorporate or have more women in the organization. And same thing with the local communities. We do have a target for having more women in participating in our community programs. So those are some of the social initiatives that we have in our 2030 agenda.
What I find so interesting about the work that your company is doing is that integrated approach, about the fact that you are not keeping things in silos. You're not doing the E or the S or the G. It's all about it going together. And at the heart of it, it's the people, because that's what drives it. Exactly. So when you start with a people-centric approach, you then start to see, how everything around them affects them, and then you address that. Exactly. And I think we have to keep promoting that. We have to start with the people at the heart of everything. And business has to start with people, because it's about the people, as you said.
Exactly.
So yes, no, I think that we really have to keep pushing that forward. Your operations are primarily in Indonesia, and your markets are global. How does the social context in which you operate influence the decisions you take championing human rights? I mean, you've spoken really about the fact that it is the global south, of course, and you're having to deal with all these different interconnected issues. You can't do everything in isolation. Poverty is an issue. How does the fact that you're in a global markets then impact you, on a localized level?
So this is really a challenge for us, in fact, because of course we're having to adapt global frameworks to a developing economy context. Exactly. And of course our complexity is really that we need to respond to the local conditions, while at the same time being able to demonstrate that we align with global standards and that we're responding to the global stakeholder expectations. At the end of the day, what we need to understand really is the local socio-economic or social context. Yes. And that's what we need to incorporate. And it's very important as well for the rest of the external stakeholders to understand that context, because it's very difficult to just view it from a Western lens, for example. In our case, when we conducted our human rights impact assessment, we realized that one of the impact areas is basically on the need to provide more protection for children. And it's interesting because when we're talking of industrial forestry and manufacturing operations, then why would we suddenly focus on children? It's because from the human rights impact assessment, we realized that we do have children and families living in our plantation estates. 6,500 children from age 0 to 18 are actually among the contract labor that are working in the plantation estates. And why is that? Because the culture and the socioeconomic conditions actually almost dictate that the contracted labor bring their families along whenever they travel for work. So we end up with such a situation. And the way we need to respond to that in terms of a human rights action is to look at the whole gamut of actions, from feeding programs, provision of daycare services, education, training, transport facilities, building schools, setting up mobile schools where such a facility is not available. So the range of expectations that we need to deliver to could be actually beyond what some other companies are needing to respond to or needing to do, right? Especially because not all local governments are also fully resourced to address this problem. So there's much more, the onus of a response is much more on the company than on the public sector in this case. So that is just an example of how the local context actually shapes the kind of actions that we need to do.
And that's really interesting, because it's really about starting with that sort of human rights due diligence.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Each company has to, assess, and understand where these risks are to people.
Yes.
And then what to do about it and how to address it. And then we come to find that business is not just about, the operations. It's actually really, really about the people that are impacted and affected by it, and the community around as well.
Yes, it's not just about the employees, I think. It really needs to be all the touch points across the value chain.
Value chain, exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's look ahead. Progress requires collaboration, and real action might call for shared frameworks. So talk to us about your work with partners. You've said that that sort of cascading approach through the value chain requires dialogue, requires collaboration, and sort of an establishment of shared frameworks with supply chain partners, civil society. So just speak to sort of how you are working with your partners on this area.
So we've been a signatory to the UN Global Compact since 2006. I think we might be one of the first, if not the first in the region, because it's been 17 years for us, right? But we've fully benefited from our membership. The guiding principles on business and human rights has been really an invaluable resource for us in drafting our policy, in setting up our due diligence framework, and the conduct of the impact assessment, and of course in the actions that followed from all these. The local network is also a very useful resource. The Indonesia Global Compact Network has also been is also a very useful platform for us in engaging in, first of course, in translating this to the local context, two, and then in engaging with other members in Indonesia, not necessarily from the same sector, but but could still share some of their lessons and best practices, and maybe even just to road test some ideas that in terms of actions that we're able to do, because we're operating in the same context. So it's almost like a safe space for us to discuss some of our challenges, right? So, but I think beyond the external partners, we also need to consider our internal partners. So I come from the sustainability department, right? But this is not just our job alone. Yes. So we really need to engender championship and ownership of this among our human resources department, the legal team, the operations and manufacturing operations in forestry, and our social capital team, the ones that deal with the communities. So I think that engagement of partners, half of that needed to be focused within the organization, because that transformation can only happen, and that integration can only happen if we have full understanding and buy-in from within as well. And from there, once you have that, then of course that's when you start cascading this as well, because they will be your champions.
Yes.
So the accelerator program, for example, was used by our company to train up to 300 members of our management, so that they are the ones who will be speaking about human rights through their respective units. And then, as you say, cascading this from within, and also then eventually to the rest of the external partnership.
That's so wonderful to hear how, the accelerator is being used, that today is the second time that I've heard somebody mention the fact that the sustainability journey, it's not just for the sustainability department or sustainability officers. Yes. It's for everybody in the company. And I think we need to keep sharing that message. It goes across many other areas, but it cannot just be one group that are responsible for this work, because otherwise it's not successful. Speaking of one group, leadership.
Yes.
Of course, when we join the Global Compact, the CEO signs a statement of support, and then we get to work, hopefully. The April Group clearly over the last 17 years has really invested in this area, and it's been something that has cascaded all the way down. What are the plans for sort of the future, the next frontier, where business and human rights are concerned?
Wow, this is a medium to long-term journey for us. Yeah, I think the focus will just continue to be on delivery. I think it's really just about implementing actions and at the same time, of course, tracking progress and reporting, much more important.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we need to communicate. We need to acknowledge where we have challenges, where we're not progressing and where we're progressing. I think it's important. That's a change process within the organization, having the courage to come out there and acknowledge that these are still some of the issues that we're having to grapple with. But it's our reality. We just need to be able to go out there and say, this is where the progress is happening, and this is where the challenges are. So that's one. And then two, of course, is really just keeping the momentum in terms of awareness raising and education. Because integration happens over a long period of time, change in mindset happens over a long period of time. So we just need to keep at it. I don't think it's just because of a policy and a system and a process that everything else will flow from there. It needs to be an unrelenting process of just being able to remind people and engage people and keep that discussion going. So just to focus on delivery, continuous awareness raising and education, and of course, as I said, working with the local network and the rest of the platforms to hopefully encourage a whole of sector change. Right, to be able to show some examples and to be able to share some lessons and best practices, and whether it's just within the forestry industry in Indonesia or with other industries as well, I think it would be interesting to see how others can be encouraged to embark on the same human rights journey.
And it's ongoing. There's no sort of end point to this area, right? Exactly. It's a constant sort of reflecting on that data. Data's yes. key, reflecting on how you're doing. Are you moving forward? Are you moving backwards? And like you said, that sort of peer review and sharing with others and best practice that we do at the Global Compact so well. So now I think we have really sort of dug into some important issues, but now let's have some fun. Well, I'm going
let's try.
Yes, I'm sure. going to, this is called the lightning round.
All right.
So basically I'm going to ask you some questions, and you have 60 seconds for each one.
Okay.
The first one, what is one piece of advice you would give to other business professionals who are just getting started on this journey? I ask this question a lot, and I'm sure when you get together with companies at the local networks, that question is asked, how are you doing 17? How did you start? What would you say to a new member of the Global Compact who just signed up?
Commitments matter, but ultimately what counts is action on the ground, delivery. In business, if you don't perform, if you don't deliver results, there's accountability, right? I mean, we can come up, our shareholder, our boss would always say, you can come up with the most fantastic strategy, but if you're not able to execute, what's the point, right? So action on the ground is really what delivers impact and ultimately also what builds trust, and that trust building process takes time. And only when they see consistency in action, that's the time that your stakeholders start saying, okay, maybe they're serious this time around.
So we started off finding out a little bit about you. I'm going to end with you. You're a leader. I want to find out what you consider 3 of the most important characteristics in leadership to create change in today's world, especially in this work that we do. What are the 3 things?
I think the one thing that really differentiates sustainability is a clear sense of purpose. Yeah, it's not a job. And because if you just consider it a job, then no, it takes a lot to move the needle, to shift the needle in terms of change. Yes, exactly, whether internally or externally. So a clear sense of purpose. It's not just about where you're going, but why are you going there? And then two, I think it takes a lot of courage to take risks, to take action, even if you know there will be inevitable setbacks, or even if you know the solutions are imperfect, because we can't wait. So you just need to take risks and move forward. And then the third part is just going back to the point on the need for collective action. So someone is actually able to galvanize and inspire collective movement, because it's not about an individual, it's never about that. This is a we type of initiative, situation, exactly. So yes, someone is able to galvanize collective action towards a clear sense of purpose, and with the courage to actually take risk and move forward even if there are uncertainties.
Well, you say someone, but I think you just described yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. That's not what I meant.
Thank you so much, Lucita.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
And thank you to our participants for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. Today, we learned that business leaders play a pivotal role in advancing human dignity by upholding human rights principles and implementing human rights due diligence strategies in their operations and their value chains. Today, Lucita has shared her unique perspective on principled leadership for the future. That's it for this Changemaker session. We look forward to seeing you again soon.